Hello, I'm Jane Lusardi from Natural England, and I'm our senior specialist in the ecosystem approach. I've got a very broad topic of ecosystem approach initiatives in England, but I'm actually going to focus on some of the initiatives that Natural England has been involved in terms of actually turning some of the policy into delivery on the ground. So Jess has talked already about some of our policies in England, and particularly the way in which the EEAC targets have come down into Biodiversity 2020 and the way in which we have our Natural Environment White Paper, The Natural Choice. But importantly, within Biodiversity 2020, we have our first governmental target on the ecosystem approach. And this is a place-based target. It's got an area in there of 17%. I'm not going to read the whole thing out because it's a very wordy target. But it's one of the high-level targets within there. It's place-based. It's about areas. It's about biodiversity and ecosystem services together. So it's about values of wildlife and values for people. And it talks about it being conserved through effective, integrated and joined-up approaches to safeguard biodiversity and ecosystem services. And it says that that's through management of our existing systems of protected areas, so that's our national parks and AONBs, and the management of and the establishment of nature improvement areas. But it's including that. What's important about this target is it's very much about partnerships than about place-based partnerships. So it's great to have targets, but actually how do we make that happen on the ground? How do we turn those policies into delivery? And partnership working really here is key. And it's important that that target, that 17%, and the assessment of contribution to that target is being done by self-assessment by partnerships. And that's just been very recently agreed, that self-assessment approach. And that really takes partnerships, place-based partnerships, on a journey so that they can see what they are currently doing to apply the ecosystem approach and what more they do need to do. You'll see here on the bottom right of the screen, we're working on at the moment a toolkit to help partnerships in doing that. So that links very closely to the outcome 1C self-assessment, but it also provides a step-by-step process that partnerships can go through if they're interested in applying the ecosystem approach. That doesn't have to be followed step by step. They can dip into it at whatever point they want to, depending on where they are themselves at the moment. And it also includes a whole series of examples that they can draw on. As well as that external toolkit, we've also internally in Natural England produced a toolkit for our staff who are working with the partnerships. So that's kind of our internal guidance. And within Natural England, we're at the moment doing a whole programme of training in the ecosystem approach across the organisation. We have an embedding programme for the ecosystem approach, and obviously a key part of that is our staff skills and experience. So we've done basic training across the whole organisation, and we're now in the process of doing practitioner training. At the moment, that's targeted at our area managers and those people who are working with large-scale, landscape-scale partnerships. So that picture is one of our very recent training events. But it's obviously not just the environmental sector and environmental partnerships that we need to be speaking to. So we've also been producing a toolkit, and this is I haven't directly been involved in this, but it's Tom Butterworth within Natural England. We've been doing this with the Forestry Commission and the Environment Agency as well. And this is a Local Environment and Economic Development Toolkit, or LEAD toolkit. And this is particularly targeted at our local enterprise partnerships who are looking at local economic development, but it uses an ecosystems framework to get them to think about those benefits that people get from the environment. And our economists go for great titles of reports and strange acronyms. So this one's called MEBI, but it's basically they've pulled together lots of the evidence for the microeconomic benefits of investment in the environment. So that's a publication that we're currently reviewing at the moment. So that is in the process of being updated. We're also doing some mapping of our own. And this mapping is based on this table, look very familiar to a whole number of people, I'm sure. But it's a table from the National Ecosystem Assessment from the England section. And it basically shows the importance, the potential of different habitats for providing different services, and the darker the green, the greater the potential of that habitat for providing that service. And we wanted to provide some very simple maps that could ideally, hopefully, be available externally for people to use as a starting point to think about the provision of ecosystem services. And it uses habitats as a proxy for services. But they are very simple. They don't think about flows of services. They don't think about the condition of habitat. They don't think about the condition of the service. They don't think about where the beneficiaries are. They're just very much a starting point. And they show potential only, all things being equal. But they cover all of England, and they're quite simple, and we've produced them for the whole country. And they look at the moment at 10, or we're in the process of doing them, but they look at 10 different ecosystem services. And obviously they work better for some services than they do for others, and we're in the process of refining them. We also had to have a different approach for cultural services. But one of the great things about them is because they are based on the CH land cover map 2007 data, they're available at a 25-metre pixel resolution, so we can actually cut them for individual areas and individual partnerships. The other thing we've been doing mapping-wise is we funded Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services Sustainability BESS at the University of York to create this gateway that's available on the web that links into all the there's lots of local projects in England, you see there's some in Wales there as well, that are mapping ecosystem services, and this provides a gateway for people to find out what's happening in their area in terms of mapping ecosystem services and to link into those projects. So it's searchable, and as I said, it's available on the web. Another tool that we've been kind of developing for practitioners is this ecosystem services transfer tool. And what we found is that what we wanted to look at or pull together was the evidence that's available to show how a land management action on a particular habitat, how that impacts on provision of ecosystem services, and whether the evidence shows that that's transferable between places. So we've developed, and we're in the second iteration of this, again with York University, this ecosystem services transfer tool, which you can search by, you can search in terms of the land management action, or you can also search in terms of the ecosystem services. And it gives you a summary it's a literature review, and it gives you a summary of each document. It also gives you a link to that document, and it gives you an indication of whether that action and impact on that ecosystem service is transferable between places. And that's going to be completed in March next year. So we've got lots of tools, but it's also really good to have some examples. And you've probably all heard of our 3 upland ecosystem services pilot projects. So we've got one in Bassenthwaite in the Lake District, one in the South Pennines, and one in Dartmoor and Exmoor in the southwest. And these are partnership projects working in collaboration with land managers and partners to enhance the delivery of multiple ecosystem services. And the aim of them was to really trial and demonstrate how the ecosystem approach could be delivered on the ground. And it's very important that they're partnership projects. This is really through the partnerships that you can get that integrated delivery. So after we kind of sorted out the governance of the projects within the partnerships, we set about trying to produce a baseline assessment of the existing ecosystem services provided by that area, and with the aim of this being map-based. And here are some of the examples of some of the maps that went into the one in the South Pennines pilot. Obviously, there's very limited data on mapping that you can map directly of ecosystem services, so we had to use a lot of proxy data and build up a kind of a picture, a jigsaw of layers really to depict the whole kind of range of services. So it's mainly a map-based document, and it includes like a brief text explaining whether proxies have been used, what the proxies are, what the limitations are with the data. So really, there was talk earlier about being transparent, really trying to be transparent about what this information is showing, and it's really about it building up a picture. It's not the end of anything, but it's the start of pulling together all the information that we have. And I should say as well that we use cuts of national data, but we also use locally available data, and available both that we had ourselves and also that other partners had. Obviously, involving people is absolutely key to the ecosystem approach. In the Bassenthwaite pilot, we did this. We had a partner steering group within the existing Bassenthwaite Lake Restoration Programme. We had workshops with farmers, and we also did a survey that the University of Cumbria did to get farmers' views on how they could provide ecosystem, how their management could provide ecosystem services. We had wider partner workshops, particularly with the kind of economic sector, with the tourism sector, with the health sector, and we did workshops and presentations specifically at tourism sector events. And we also engaged with the wider public. We had an annual event that the partnership has that was particularly focused on the ecosystem approach and provision of ecosystem services. And we also did some work with Nurture Lakeland, who you may have heard of, who are one of the key organisations in the country who run a visitor payback scheme, which is where people who are visiting the Lake District make a contribution to environmental projects. That's either through donation or through a bit added onto their overnight stay, so an additional piece that they pay. And we did work with them with 35 businesses, so 35 tourism businesses, to see how visitor payback could be used as a payment for ecosystem services and how that could be marketed. And at the top here, the one I haven't mentioned yet, but is that we did opportunity mapping workshops as well. So you saw the baseline assessment maps, the maps that we put into our baseline assessments. We got those produced at a really large scale. The Lake District National Park did that. And then we had a opportunity mapping workshop where we invited people who really knew the ground, knew the area well on the ground. So your National Trust wardens and your Lake District National Park rangers, all those people who knew it very well. And we got people to mark the maps. We'd identified some key activities, and we got people to mark the maps of where the opportunities are. So not precisely where land management should change, because that's obviously dependent on the decision of the person who manages and owns that land, but where there were opportunities, say for example to increase an area of woodland or those sorts of things. As I said before, through that mapping workshop, we identified key actions, and we ended up, this was refined from that initial workshop, but we ended up with 7 key actions to enhance multiple ecosystem services. And this list of ecosystem services doesn't come from the NEA or the MA or anything. It's the Lake District National Parks Partnerships Principles of Land Management. So we used that as the things that we were aiming for, because a whole range of partners had already signed up to that. And then we looked with the partners. We were really trying to seek the win-wins. So we looked with the partners to see, well, if we did that, what of your objectives would that contribute? Which of your aims would that contribute to? So the pink is showing the ecosystem services, and the blue is showing how it contributes to a whole range of different partners' objectives. The delivery plan itself is very concise. It consists of a series of maps, one map, A4, and next to that, an A4 piece of text, so one per action, that says why you'd want to do it, what ecosystem services enhance, whereabouts you'd want to do it, how it would fit with the farming system, and how it could be delivered, both in terms of partnership delivery mechanisms, but also in terms of funding mechanisms, importantly. Because we didn't have a big fund to make this happen on the ground. We didn't set up a payments for ecosystem services scheme or anything like that. It was about pulling together the existing funding streams and existing initiatives. So the map for each one. And this one at the top, see if I can get the thing to work here. I can't move away from there, can I? If you can see, there's some darker hatched areas, and they show where there's specific opportunities to increase woodland cover. So that's where you might want to extend an existing woodland or join up some existing woodlands. So this is what the people on the ground were saying to us, look, there's an opportunity there, that would be great to do that. And then there's some broader areas of search where people go, oh yeah, that bit over there, there's potential there. We also cut it so that we removed all the deep peat, so we weren't looking at planting any trees on deep peat. And the orange areas on here are the bracken beds, which are really important because obviously they're the deeper soils, the remnant woodland flora, they're the areas which would have held the woodland originally, but also really critically, they're the bits that are of least agricultural value for the farmers. We also, in our South Pennines pilot, undertook an economic valuation, and we considered 2 scenarios. We considered an improved scenario, where you invest in restoration of the blanket bog, and a decline scenario where you'd remove all investment. So there'd be no kind of public investment in restoration of that peat bog. And we use two different approaches in terms of the valuation, two different derived values, and we came up with cost-benefit analyses that basically showed that for every pound that you didn't invest, you could lose £5. For every pound that you did invest, you could get a gain of 1.2 to 3. That's over a 25-year period. I'm not the economist, so please don't ask me too many technical questions on the valuation. The other thing we've done with our South Pennines pilot is more recently, last year, we had a joint project with DEFRA where we got the Crichton Carbon Centre, URS, Birmingham City University, Landform Research and IUCN to do a project towards the development of place-based payments of ecosystem services, so ones that would be looking at enhancement of multiple ecosystem services within a particular place. And as I said, this was based on our South Pennines Ecosystem Service pilot project. And it looked at what data was available and how that suitable as that existing data is for development of a PES scheme. So it didn't actually it took us to a bit of a step further down that process, basically. It didn't end up with, it wasn't the aim of it to set up a payments for ecosystem services scheme. And it considered different packages of services and how different payment rates could fit with existing payment mechanisms. And also within there's a detailed technical appendix which looks at developing simple-to-use carbon metrics for voluntary and mandatory markets. And that is being fed into the work that's now happening on the pilot peatland carbon codes. So it doesn't develop full metrics, but it takes us another step in that way. I'll have to say that because the person from Crichton Carbon Centre is always very keen to say it needs to be tested further, and we need more time before we're very confident in that. So that was a bit of a whistle-stop tour through some of the initiatives that we're involved in, and not all of them either. But this is kind of all of our publications are on our website, so it's go there and have a look. Thank you very much.